October 1813, the Japanese cargo ship Tokujo Maru sailed from Toba, its hull laden with rice and soybeans, a routine tribute for the shogun in Edo. Captain Oguri Jukichi commanded a crew of 14, navigating the familiar coastal waters of their homeland. But the Pacific Ocean had other plans. A violent storm, a monster of wind and waves, descended upon them without warning. The ship's rudder snapped, leaving them powerless. The massive mast, now a dangerous pendulum, threatened to tear the vessel apart, forcing the crew to make a desperate choice: cut it down and lose all hope of control. For 484 days, the Tokujo Maru became a ghost ship, a coffin of wood and sailcloth adrift on the Kuroshio Current, the fabled river of the sea from which no man returns. 14 men were swept into the endless blue. Only 2 would ever see land again. This is not a story of quick thinking over a weekend. This is a story of enduring 16 months of slow, agonizing decay. It is the story of the longest time anyone has ever survived adrift at sea. A story of starvation, disease, and the crushing psychological weight of watching your comrades die one by one. How did Captain Jukichi and one sailor, Otokichi, survive for nearly a year and a half when all others perished? The answers lie in a set of skills that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. Tools to trust, skills that last. This is Bushcraft Arsenal. Number 1, building a seawater, still to make freshwater. The most immediate threat in any survival situation at sea is thirst. The human body lasts days without water. Drinking seawater causes fatal dehydration. The crew of the Tokujo Maru had a limited supply of freshwater, which would have been exhausted in a matter of weeks. Their survival for 484 days was only possible because they mastered a skill that few sailors of their time even attempted: distilling seawater. Using salvaged materials, they fashioned a still, simple in principle, monumental in execution. They boiled seawater in a pot, using ship wood as fuel. As the seawater boiled, fresh water turned to steam, leaving the salt and other impurities behind. The next challenge was to collect that steam. They would have needed to create a lid or a covering that could capture the steam and channel it towards a cooler surface. This could have been metal, shell, or angled wood. As the hot steam hit the cooler surface, it would condense back into liquid freshwater, which would then drip down into a collection vessel. This process would have been painstakingly slow. To produce even a small amount of drinking water would have required hours of boiling and careful management of their dwindling fuel supply. The fire itself was a constant hazard on a wooden ship. Yet, this improvised still was the single most important piece of technology that stood between the crew and a certain agonizing death from thirst. It was a lifeline, drop by precious drop. The ocean offered them a world of water they couldn't drink. They had to make their own. Comment, water maker, if you could build a still to survive. But fresh water alone couldn't stop the slow decay of their bodies. Number 2, extreme rationing of soybeans and rice. Thirst was conquered, but starvation was a patient predator. The Tokujo Maru was a cargo vessel, and its hold contained its own form of life insurance, hundreds of bags of rice and soybeans. Turning bulk cargo into sustainable food for 14 men required extraordinary discipline. Captain Jukichi's second critical survival skill was the implementation of an extreme rationing system. Every grain became precious as gold. Jukichi, as captain, would have taken immediate control of the food stores, understanding that without strict control, panic and hoarding would doom them all. He calculated the minimum each man needed, a grim balance between extending supplies and starvation. The daily ration, perhaps a cup of rice and handful of soybeans, provided just enough calories to stave off immediate starvation. The soybeans were their most important asset. They are a nutritional powerhouse, rich in protein and fat, which would have been essential for maintaining muscle mass and providing energy. The rice would have provided carbohydrates, the body's primary fuel source. Together, they formed a complete protein, providing all the essential amino acids the body needs to function. However, they lacked one critical nutrient, vitamin C. This deficiency would become a death sentence for most of the crew. Jukichi's rationing system was not just about measuring out food. It was about psychological control. By establishing a strict, predictable routine, he gave the men a sense of order in a world of chaos. The daily meal, however small, became a ritual, a moment of normalcy in the endless, monotonous days. It was a reminder that they were still fighting, that they had a plan, and that their captain was in control. This psychological stability was as important as the calories themselves. They had food, but not enough. Every meal was a reminder of how close they were to the end. But food without morale was just a slower way to die. Number 3. Crisis leadership and psychological fortitude. For 484 days, the real battle wasn't against the waves or the wind. It was fought in the minds of the men. The Tokujo Maru was not just a drifting ship. It was a floating tomb, and Captain Jukichi's most critical role was to keep it from becoming a madhouse. His leadership was the invisible force that held the crew together as their bodies and spirits broke. By May of 1814, 7 months into their ordeal, the first man died. The cause was scurvy. Lack of vitamin C meant their bodies fell apart from within. Gums bled, teeth fell out, old wounds reopened, and bruises appeared from the slightest touch. They weakened and succumbed to internal bleeding. Jukichi and Otokichi, the 2 survivors, likely supplemented their diet by catching fish, which would have provided some of the nutrients the others were missing. But as the months wore on, Jukichi watched his crew, his comrades, die one by one. By late June, only he and 2 others remained. Then another died. For the final year of their journey, it was just Jukichi and Otokichi, alone on a vast, empty ocean. This is where Jukichi's psychological fortitude was tested to its absolute limit. He maintained hope while surrounded by death, enforced rationing while men starved, and managed despair in a confined, hopeless environment. He did this by maintaining the routines of a ship at sea. He would have insisted on watches, on keeping the vessel as clean and orderly as possible, on the simple rituals of daily life. This structure, this illusion of control, was a powerful psychological anchor in a world that had spun out of control. Modern survival psychology teaches that the will to live is a conscious decision, a choice that must be made every single day. Jukichi embodied this. He saw mountaintops on the horizon in January 1815, a flicker of hope, only to have the currents pull them away. For most, this would have been the final blow. For Jukichi, it was just another day. He had to believe in rescue when there was no reason to. He had to lead, even when he was leading men to their graves. This mental toughness is the rarest and most essential survival skill of all. They had water, they had food, they had a leader, but they were still at the mercy of the one force they could not control, the ocean itself. Number 4, mastering the Kuroshio Current, navigating without control. Captain Jukichi was a master of coastal navigation, but the moment the Tokujo Maru's rudder snapped, he was no longer a navigator. He was a passenger. the ship was caught in the grip of one of the most powerful forces in the natural world, the Kuroshio Current. Known as the Black Current for the deep, dark blue of its waters, this massive ocean river flows from the coast of Taiwan up past Japan and then arcs across the vast expanse of the Pacific towards North America. For centuries, Japanese sailors had a name for it, Wei Lu, the current to a world in the east from which no man has ever returned. Jukichi and his crew were about to prove them wrong. Understanding this current was not about steering the ship, it was about predicting their fate. Jukichi, an experienced mariner, would have known the legends of the Kuroshio. He would have known that once caught in its flow, there was no turning back. His survival skill was not in fighting the current, but in understanding it. He observed drift direction, water speed, and temperature shifts. He watched stars to confirm their eastward journey. This knowledge, as grim as it was essential for planning. It allowed him to estimate how long their journey might be, how long their food and water would need to last, and what kind of climate they were heading towards. The Kuroshio was their engine and their prison. It carried them over 5,000 miles, an unimaginable distance for a rudderless, mastless ship. The current dictated their path, but Jukichi's understanding of it allowed him to maintain a degree of strategic awareness. He knew they were not simply lost. They were on a one-way journey to a new world. This understanding was a crucial psychological tool. It replaced the terror of being lost with the grim determination of a long-distance voyage. They were not adrift, they were in transit. This mental reframing, this acceptance of their powerlessness against the ocean, was a form of mastery in itself. They were being carried to an unknown land, a place of myth and legend. But the current that carried them also carried life. The same ocean that was their prison also offered a source of sustenance. Number 5. Improvising fishing gear to supplement rations. The slow march of scurvy was taking its toll. The crew, subsisting on a diet of only rice and soybeans, were dying one by one from a lack of vitamin C. Captain Jukichi and the sailor Otokichi survived because they supplemented this meager diet with a vital source of fresh nutrients: fish. Their ability to improvise fishing gear from the wreckage of their own ship was the skill that made the ultimate difference between life and death. A cargo ship like the Tokujo Maru would not have been equipped with dedicated fishing gear. Jukichi and his men had to create it from scratch. They scavenged metal, wood, and cordage. Hooks came from bent nails. Scrap metal became lures. Rope strands became fishing line. Catching fish in the open ocean is not easy. They learned fish habits and used hand lining, feeling for the slightest tug. Every fish they caught was a treasure. It provided a vital source of protein and, most importantly, the vitamins and minerals that were absent in their dried rations. The fresh meat would have contained small amounts of vitamin C, enough to hold off the most severe effects of scurvy that were killing their shipmates. This is the grim reality of long-term survival. The smallest advantage, the slightest dietary supplement, can be the deciding factor. This act of fishing was more than just a source of food. It was an act of defiance. It was a way of fighting back against the relentless decay of their bodies. It was a way of harvesting life from the very ocean that was trying to kill them. Each fish was a small victory, a tangible sign that they could still provide for themselves, that they were not entirely helpless. This psychological boost, this feeling of agency, was as nourishing as the fish itself. They were catching life from the sea, but the sea was also a constant, violent threat. The same ocean that fed them could also swallow them whole. Number 6. Constant vessel maintenance and storm survival. The Tokujo Maru was not a static shelter. It was a dying organism, and keeping it alive was a full-time job. The initial storm broke rudder and mast. For 484 days, sun, salt, and waves assaulted the ship. Wood rotted, ropes frayed, leaks threatened catastrophe. Jukichi's sixth survival skill was the tireless, thankless work of vessel maintenance. This was not a task that could be done once and forgotten. It was a daily, hourly struggle. The crew would have been constantly bailing water, using buckets, pots, or even their own hands to keep the ship from swamping. Every new leak had to be found and patched immediately. They used cloth strips, wood pieces, even rice paste to plug gaps. Sun baked the deck, opening cracks. Salt corroded metal. Constant rocking stressed every joint. Surviving the initial storm was only the beginning. Over the course of 16 months, they would have faced countless others. Without a mast or rudder, they had no way to steer into the waves or run from a storm. They were completely at the mercy of the weather. During a storm, the ship would have been a terrifying place. Waves would crash over the deck, threatening to wash away their precious supplies and the men themselves. The work would have been brutal and exhausting, a desperate fight to keep the ocean out of their fragile vessel. Jukichi's leadership would have been crucial in organizing the men, keeping them focused on the task at hand, and preventing them from succumbing to the terror of the storm. This constant work was more than just manual labor. It was a way of maintaining a sense of purpose. By caring for the ship, they were caring for themselves. The ship was their world, their only protection against the vast, indifferent ocean. Every patch they applied, every bucket of water they bailed, was an affirmation of their will to live. It was a way of saying that they would not simply let the sea take them. They would fight for every inch, for every hour, for every day. They kept their ship afloat, a tiny island of wood in a world of water. But the greatest challenge was not the physical world around them. It was the internal world of their own minds. Number 7, maintaining hope and purpose through documentation. The greatest danger was not starvation, but erosion of the human spirit. Hope is a finite resource, and in the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific, it was the most precious commodity of all. Captain Jukichi's seventh and perhaps most surprising survival skill was his commitment to documentation. He kept a log, a record of their agonizing journey. This act of writing, of bearing witness to their own slow-motion disaster, was a powerful tool for psychological survival. Keeping a log was a profound statement of humanity, a refusal to be erased. Jukichi recorded the direction of the drift, the weather, the deaths of his crewmen, and his own thoughts and fears. This was not a mere diary. It was a captain's log, a continuation of his duty, a link to the life he had known. It imposed order on chaos, narrative on a meaningless void. Each entry was an act of defiance, a declaration that their story mattered, even if no one was left to tell it. This log served a critical psychological function. It externalized the trauma, allowing Jukichi to process the horror of his situation. It gave him a sense of control, a feeling that he was still a captain, still in command of his ship and his own mind. It also provided a connection to the future. He was writing for an audience, for the people who would one day find his log and learn of their fate. This belief in a future, in a world beyond the endless horizon, was a powerful antidote to despair. After his rescue, this log, which he titled A Captain's Diary, became a vital historical document. It was officially banned by the Japanese government, which feared the influence of foreign ideas, but it was secretly circulated among scholars, providing a rare glimpse into the world outside of their isolated nation. Jukichi's act of writing, born of a desperate need to maintain his own sanity, ultimately played a role in the opening of Japan to the world. It is a powerful testament to the idea that even in the most hopeless of circumstances, the act of creation, of telling our own story, can be a revolutionary act of survival. They had documented their past, they were enduring their present, but their future was about to collide with a world they could not have imagined. Number 8. Adapting to a new world. First contact and cultural exchange. On March 24, 1815, after 484 days adrift, a sail appeared on the horizon. It was the American brig Forester, captained by William J. Piggott. This was salvation after 16 agonizing months. But the ordeal wasn't over. Their final survival skill was the ability to navigate a world that was utterly alien to them, a world of strange customs, strange food, and strange people. Brought ashore near Santa Barbara, Jukichi believed he was back in Japan. Greeted by horsemen, he was terrified and amazed. He'd never seen horses. He thought the men were Dutch, the only Westerners allowed in Japan at the time. He was taken to an adobe house at Rancho Refugio, where he encountered a culture that was a world away from his own. He was repelled by cattle slaughter, shocking for Buddhist Japan. He was enchanted by women's colorful costumes. This was a survival challenge of a different kind. Jukichi had to overcome his fear and suspicion, to communicate without a common language, and to trust the strangers who had rescued him. His ability to adapt, to observe, and to learn was as crucial as his ability to distill seawater or ration food. He spent 10 days in this new Spain, a guest in a world he never knew existed. His 2 crewmen were brought ashore and their health rapidly improved with proper food and care. From California, the survivors were taken to Alaska, then to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, where they spent a winter. Finally, in July of 1816, nearly 3 years after they had been swept out to sea, Jukichi and Otokichi set foot on Japanese soil once again, but their homecoming was not a celebration. They were viewed with suspicion, tainted by their contact with foreigners. Jukichi lived the rest of his life in virtual seclusion, a hero who was never recognized in his own time. Conclusion. Captain Oguri Jukichi's 484-day ordeal is the longest survival at sea in recorded history. It is a story that pushes the limits of what we believe is possible. It is a story of incredible skill, unshakable leadership, and refusal to die. They were active participants in their survival. They built, fished, rationed, maintained, and endured, transforming a floating coffin into a vessel of hope. Jukichi's story is a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the resilience of the human spirit. It is a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, we have the capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to survive. His journey across the Pacific was more than just a physical one. It was a journey into the heart of what it means to be human. Let me know in the comments which of Captain Jukichi's survival skills you think was the most critical. Was it the technical skill of building a still, or the mental fortitude to watch your crew die and still carry on? See you in the next episode.